SVG makes a big mistake in the final corners to allow Buescher to get his first win of the season, and the playoff drama continues to heat up with only one race remaining till 4 drivers are eliminated. Let's talk about NASCAR's playoff race at Watkins Glen. Hello everybody, welcome to Dirty Air. I'm your host Alex Lambert, and let's talk about NASCAR's one and done playoff race at Watkins Glen, right? This is the first time we've been to Watkins Glen in the playoffs, and if for the near future, it will be the last time. So one race in the playoffs for Watkins Glen, and it was certainly an insane, exciting race. A lot of action took place on the final lap. SVG making a mistake, allowing Chris Buescher to get to him and get a chance to capitalize, get his first win of the season. Unfortunately for him, not in the playoffs, but it was a disastrous day for those playoff drivers. If you look at the results, you'd have to go down to 6th to find your first playoff driver, and that's Chase Briscoe. So we'll break down everything that happened. Let's go ahead and get right on into it, and let's start out by talking about the finish. A fantastic, classic finish at Watkins Glen. You have Chris Buescher, SVG battling on multiple late race restarts, and it looked like Chris Buescher was able to excel every time, but SVG looked to be a little bit stronger in the following corners, especially in going into the bus stop in that turn. It looked like SVG was really faster than Chris Buescher, but in that turn on the final lap, SVG with the lead, got the lead on the final restart, hits the inside wall just barely, but just touching it, gets his car all out of whack in the following corners, allowing Buescher to get to him. And Buescher could have turned him here on the final lap, but Buescher let off the gas a little bit. They were making contact, allowed it to be a clean race, and what a performance by Buescher, not making any mistakes at the end, putting the pressure on SVG. You can say SVG made the mistake, giving Buescher the win all you want to, but in the end, it was Buescher that didn't make a mistake himself and put the pressure on SVG. We talk about putting the pressure on the leader all the time in these close late race finishes. Well, it happened today, and it got to SVG potentially just enough to knock him out of the lead, and SVG finishes in the second position while Chris Buescher celebrates his first win of the year. Big win for Chris Buescher. We can talk about it just momentarily. Didn't make the playoffs. Unfortunately, was so close to winning races this year. Been a bit of a wild year with trying to get a race win for everyone involved. A lot of drivers that probably should have won a couple of races have not won a race due to their own mistakes or some misfortune with late race cautions. Once again, another overtime finish today, which is starting to get really frustrating. But fortunately for Buescher, he's able to get a win. Third consecutive season for him with a NASCAR race win, at least one, right? I mean, he got one in 2022, 2 in 2023, and then of course now 1 in 2024. So big deal for that team in itself. So big deal that they were able to get the win today and solidify that they're still a winning team. And I think going into next year, probably be a little less fluky, and I believe that team will be in the playoffs and contending for a better position in the final standings. So we took a look at the finish. Let's go ahead and take a look at the entire top 10. Once again, Chris Buescher, Shane Van Gisbergen. I want to mention Shane Van Gisbergen here because this is big, right? He's going full time next year for Trackhouse in a third car. And if SVG is able to be the odds-on favorite at Chicago in the road course, which is on the schedule next year, the odds-on favorite going into today at Watkins Glen, lost it in the final turn. We talk about how capitalizing at the end is important, but if SVG can get one win at the 5-6 road courses next year, a new road course as well in Mexico, big advantage to Van Gisbergen. Very legitimately, this driver can make the playoffs. It's almost expected for him to win at least one of these road course races. Talk about winning multiple road course races, but then you've added a whole nother level of uncertainty to the final results. So certainly big deal for Van Gisbergen that every time we go to one of these tracks, with the exception of a couple like the Indy road course he didn't run as well at, SVG's in contention, won the Chicago street race in 2023, was in contention to win the Chicago street race till a mid-race incident, and of course was very much in contention leading on the final lap today. SVG, with more experience going into these road courses with those cup drivers, is a massive advantage for the driver of the 16 Chevrolet. Carson Osevar, great run for him. I like what he's doing too going into next year. He's been solid at multiple different racetracks, especially at the end of the regular season. Didn't have a great week last week, but is finishing the top 10 more consistently. Expect Spire to continue to be up on the uphill with these very talented race car drivers continuing to come in. 3-car team next year. Want to watch Carson Osevar, the rookie this year, in his sophomore year, because I think he could be a force to be reckoned with next season. We'll have to see. Maybe the other drivers will figure out what he's doing a little bit. He could have a sophomore slump, but just keep an eye on what that 77 team can do. Ross Chastain in the one car after having a rough year had a great race today, was able to qualify on pole, show a little bit of speed, run well. Unfortunately, didn't get the win for him, but was able to run well and show the Trackhouse is still up to par with the rest of the field today in a Chevrolet. So fourth position for him, solid run. Zane Smith, another one of those Spire Motorsports cars, like I mentioned. They've been good at the road courses all season long. They're getting better throughout the year, really increasing from where we were at Daytona in February. Much better now at Watkins Glen in September. So we'll have to keep an eye on that going into 2025 to see how that Spire Motorsports team continues to progress. Chase Briscoe, highest finishing playoff driver, sort of surprisingly. He's had some success at road courses, but I wasn't expecting him to be the highest finishing playoff driver today. That puts him now 6 points above the cut line, so a nice couple of weeks putting together for Chase Briscoe. Michael McDowell, another one of those sort of road course racers we've seen win at a road course before, run up front at the road courses consistently. Expected to see him run up front today. Corey LaJoie, a little bit surprised to see him in the 8th position after causing a wreck early on in the race. And you have Ryan Preece 9th and Austin Cindric in the 10th position, another playoff driver in 10th who's been executing very well in this playoffs, and we'll talk about that as we go through the grid. So let's pull it up, right? The playoff grid, so much action took place all day long. Christopher Bell, solid day for him. Unfortunately got turned around sideways midway through the race trying to make it to pit road by Austin Dillon. That was unfortunate for him, cost him a few points there, but he's now seated at number 2 going into the cutoff race. So almost guaranteed in for Christopher Bell. Austin Cindric is now seated in the 3rd position after a awful regular season. Got to win at Gateway, punches ticket in the playoffs. They have been executing perfectly. They could make it farther in the playoffs than I originally thought. They're having a great job executing. They did great last week in Atlanta executing, had a fast car, did a great job executing this week. Every time we talk about how the playoff drivers are having bad days and having bad races, we don't show Austin Cindric in those highlight reels. That shows a lot. Not only that, they have enough speed to contend and finish in the top 10, and they could be better moving forward. Once again, we have another road course coming up in the playoffs, another super speedway at Talladega moving up the playoffs. Watch Austin Cindric to, I don't see a Final Four appearance, but I do see a round of 8 appearance for that number 2 team. Very realistic right now as we continue to move through the playoffs. Tyler Reddick, unfortunately, bad day for him, but has a lot of bonus points, and I expect him to keep moving forward. Road course racing is usually his strength, but it was not today with some bad misfortune throughout the entirety of the event. Chase Elliott, 30 points above. Ryan Blaney out of the race early, very upset. Getting involved in that Corey LaJoie wreck on lap number 1. That took out a lot of guys. Denny Hamlin got big damage from that as well. Ryan Blaney with damage. Christopher Bell actually got some damage from that too. Big mistake there by Corey LaJoie, and it needs to be addressed because this continues to happen with the 7 teams. So that's certainly frustrating for all drivers and team owners that work in the garage area that have to continue to see the same car number, even if it's not the cause of the wreck, involved in the accident, which is usually doesn't equal good things when the same car number is, even if they're not causing it entirely, involved in so many incidents. But Ryan Blaney still 29 points above, needs to have a solid day next week at Bristol. Try to get some stage points, but just try to finish the race. He's got enough speed, that 12 car's got enough speed to finish top 10, finish top 15, whatever, to get to the next round. That's all they have to do, finish the race. Don't get caught up in some crap at any portion at Bristol, which is way easier said than done with 500 laps around that bull ring. Kyle Larson, 26 points above after a few mistakes today on pit road. The pressure seems to be getting to that team just a little bit. Obviously, it was also difficult for him. It seemed like he was not adapting well to pitting the opposite way. You pit as if you're making right turns at this racetrack instead of making left, sort of vice versa than what you're usually doing. So I think Kyle Larson made a few mistakes due to that. William Byron, 25 points above the cut line now. You can take a look at a late race wreck here with him and Brad Keselowski. Unfortunate for him, lost a lot of points today, William Byron did, off of that. So if I look at the top 10 on the playoff grid, right, you see Joey Logano in gold with the win. Not really worried about him. But if I look at the top 10, the only way they don't advance next week is if something goes entirely wrong. That's extremely slow. Late race disaster on a pit stop, gets involved in an accident or a crash early in the race. That's very possible at Bristol, but to kind of dissect what we need to look at going into next week, that's the only way I see one of those second seeded through 10th seeded missing the playoffs as if it's a disaster of a day, right? All those teams have enough speed to where they can make it to the next round by finishing the race. If they have speed, nothing goes disastrously wrong, they'll finish in the top 10, top 15, top 20 at worst, and they'll make it into the next round of the playoffs. We have to keep an eye on that. When it gets a little closer, you have Chase Briscoe, had a great run today, right? Got some points today, 6 points above the cut line. Ty Gibbs, only 6 points above the cut line after a rough day for the 54 team as well. Denny Hamlin, where does the disaster start right now? 6 points below the cut line. Got involved in the Core of the Joy wreck early. Got involved in another late race accident with Brad Keselowski. And Denny Hamlin also caused that wreck, wrecking himself, tearing up the race car even more, losing more positions, causing more stress. Last week it was a disaster for Denny Hamlin all weekend long. Had problems with the engine in qualifying. Had problems when we started the race, got caught up in some accidents. Just really not a great playoffs for Denny Hamlin. I'm confused because I don't understand why this team is being so slow. I don't know why Denny Hamlin qualified 22nd going into this race. That's not good. He's won the pole a couple times this year. Started in the top 10 most of the time this year, and now he's qualifying 22nd. Gets caught up in accidents early in the race. That's what it's a result in. I don't know. Denny Hamlin just seems like a team I thought going in was really going to be well at executing the playoffs. Seems like that pressure's getting to him and that team. Just mistakes that I don't understand that should not be happening from the 11 team, and it could very realistically take him out of the playoffs. I think he'll make it to the next round. I think he has a good chance to win Bristol. He won it in the spring. He won it a couple of years ago at this racetrack in the playoffs. I did last year in the playoffs at this track. Should be interesting to see what Denny Hamlin does, but just don't understand why it's been so bad for Denny Hamlin. You can blame luck all you want, but there's also been a lot of key points. I can look at poor execution costing a lot of him this year. The Toyota incident where he lost multiple bonus points, was it 10 or 15 bonus points at least? Big mistakes from the 11 team and Toyota this year that could cost him a championship. A really frustrating season for that team as we keep going into the playoffs. Brad Keselowski, 12 points below, another disaster. We showed about how he was in the wreck with Denny Hamlin. He was in the wreck with William Byron. Rough day for the 16. Multiple pit road penalties for Brad Keselowski on the 6. I think every time we had a pit stop, I saw the 6-car Brad Keselowski being posted for pit road penalty. That's why he's now 14th seeded, 12 points below the cut line. Got to try to advance next week at Bristol, which he has run there well before in the playoffs recently. Martin Truex Jr., another bad day for him. Just can't get the ball rolling. 14 points below the cut line. Harrison Burton, no speed. I didn't expect him to have much speed going in the playoffs. Now 20 points below. We'll see if he can shock me next week and find a way in, but I don't see a situation where that happens. We talked a little bit about the messy racing. I believe today was the 12th or 13th overtime of the year. I believe we've now broken the record for most overtime finishes in a single season. I do want to mention, because Truex Jr. made a good point in his post-race interview, that it's sort of ridiculous. And I'll listen to Martin Truex Jr. for a couple of reasons. He very rarely causes wrecks. I mean, when he causes a wreck, it's a big deal because it just does not happen. There's a few other drivers you can name like that as well. So when Truex is frustrated at all the late race wrecking, I understand it. And I'm a little frustrated as well. I don't understand how the best drivers in the world can cause all these accidents and continue to run. There needs to be somebody, either, you can say NASCAR needs to put the foot down, but maybe another driver needs to put the foot down as well and say, hey, if you continue to do this, I'm going to make sure there's consequences moving forward, even if it's just to scare them, to sort of try to sort this out, because it's been too aggressive, too crazy at the end of these races lately. Every race, it's multiple cautions, and you get this sometimes. Classic NASCAR, right? You get these late race cautions, crazy finishes, but every single week is starting to get a little frustrating for me, and I think a majority of the fans. But you guys let me know what you think. But that's really it. All there is to talk about after NASCAR's playoff race at Watkins Glen. Thought it was a good race, thought it was a great show, but that's it. All there is to discuss. And we do go to Bristol next week for the final race of the first round. The playoff grid will go from 16 to 12 following NASCAR at Bristol. So, of course, like and subscribe if you like the video. Share it if you do. I really appreciate it. And, of course, about Kyle Busch getting caught up in a wreck early. Let's get rowdy.